non-discrimination and harassment, and maintaining a safe workplace are common trainings that businesses do put on for their employees, just so people are more aware. With the goal that we want people to feel comfortable, safe, happy at work, and wanting to come to work. So that's why we do these trainings. So so doing this training today, your company's committed to providing a safe environment for everyone. That's, their employees, the vendors, customers, all of that. And then, again, as we mentioned, it's really about your awareness on what does, keeping the workplace safe look like, and if we have concerns, what we can do about it. So again, just your awareness. It's not the responsibility for you folks to stop workplace violence, but sometimes there's some things we can do to prevent it from going further. All right, so what we're going to talk about today is just looking at what is workplace violence. We're going to review the company policy, and then look at some warning signs and things to do that we can prevent things from going further to prevent that workplace violence. And then we'll again talk about work life, your EAP as a resource. So unfortunately, workplace violence happens. We hear about it. Sometimes locally, sometimes in other places. So any business is potentially at risk. Some businesses are at greater risk, right, based on what the nature of the business is. So any workplace is potentially vulnerable to workplace violence. And when, a lot of times, because this is a common training that we do, the reason that HR and leadership want to do these trainings is just so people can be aware with the goal that everybody feels safe. And so, because we know that the effects of a workplace violence incident are huge, it impacts the reputation. People don't want to work there, so it impacts the recruitment, the retention, and it has a huge financial impact. So it can be very devastating. We're going to look at a couple of situations that happen here in our state. Some people remember in 1999 the Xerox incident, and that was huge. And I remember thinking like, well, I can't believe this happened in Hawaii, right? Because we always think we're like safe and a little bit more isolated, but it was devastating. It was huge. And as a result of that incident, 7 people lost their life. And then there was another one that happened in 2019, was at Pearl Harbor, a Navy sailor opened fire, 3 people were shot, 2 lost their life, and then he took his own life. So again, it was one of those kind of like, wow, it happened in our state as well. So thinking about the impact of that, just talking about it, I know it brings up, just like, I feel like really sad for the loss for the people that lost their lives and their families, but also for those companies. What they're still probably experiencing some aftermath. So here's OSHA's definition of what counts as workplace violence. So it can be any act or threat of physical violence, harassment, intimidation, or any threatening behavior, disruptive behavior that occurs at the work site. The way they define the work site is a building, a surrounding. So that could be outside the building, there's a courtyard, a parking lot, any field locations, so people that go out into the field, traveling to and from work assignments. So it does give a really broad, definition to include the work sites. Your company policy is reflected here. So it's titled the Workplace Violence and Violence Prevention. We referenced the number. And so just to summarize, the policy is HDS really strives for that safe work environment, will not tolerate any verbal or physical intimidation, harassment or violence or threats of violence directed towards any of its employees. Again, your policy is really well written. And as we go through this presentation, it's just going to highlight some of the things in the policy as well. So a lot of companies have this as what's behavior that's prohibited to maintain that safe workplace environment. So any type of physical altercation. I have some examples here, but physical altercation is any contact where people are putting their hands. So that's prohibited. Verbal aggressive behavior. So what would be examples of verbally aggressive behaviors?
Yelling.
Yelling. Swearing at someone. Degrading, humiliation, any of that verbally aggressive behavior. The next one looks at threats, so it can be direct or implied. And it can be to an individual or family and friends. So an example that someone might be mad and say, like, I know where you live, or I know where you work. It's a threat. Sometimes people say those things because they're upset, but we want to always be mindful that we need to take it serious and let someone know, like, it didn't feel good. Most companies have that weapons, any type of firearms may not be on property or any dangerous weapons, just for the protection. And usually when people have access to weapons, that just increases the risk if they're not in a good state of mind. Any intentional threat of company's property, equipments, stalking or unauthorized surveillance, and any other conduct that constitutes a threat of violent behavior. And again, with the goal to keep people safe. What about blocking?
So you have a chat from Ari. She said, what about blocking an employee from passing or keeping an employee from leaving a space or room?
What do you guys think about that? I can see that, to me, that seems intimidating and also it's in that threat area, like kind of like, there's possibly posturing too, right? That's a concerning behavior. Yes. So when we think about violence in the workplace, a lot of times we're thinking about it's between two employees that aren't getting along, or someone's mad at their manager or somebody in leadership. But it also can come in other forms. So stranger, and I think it was last year when there was an incident downtown where someone threw, it was kind of a, they weren't related, there was no like relationship or they didn't know each other, but they threw, I think it was acid. So that was kind of an example of a stranger type of situation. I think that person had just got off work. So that was pretty random and alarming. So that was an example of where it can happen. And then sometimes with customer and clients, vendors, people visiting, and friends and family members also sometimes can pose a risk if they come into the property. So an example might be if someone no longer works for the company and a family member showed up trying to find answers or was trying to intimidate. That would be an example of where we would want to be concerned and would be from some place we might not think about. So this gives some examples of high risk jobs that potentially are at greater risk for workplace violence. So healthcare professionals, thinking about emergency room staff, a lot of times people are coming in with untreated mental health issues, or they're trying to hide something. So that's a high risk behavior. Frontline customer service. So when I think about the front line, that could be like somebody that DMV, and maybe they can't get pass the test. Somebody could get agitated. Could be somebody at the library. I mean, just those places where they're having that face-to-face contact. I don't think you folks have a whole lot of that. But those are what we're referring to. That's what we refer to with the frontline customer service agencies. Usually where people are like unhappy, like they're gonna get a no. Banking, a lot of times there's that face-to-face contact. Even at, going to the market, right? Sometimes, people, that's a face-to-face customer and employee. So those are those examples. Public service workers, law enforcement, first responders. I do, in the past, I've done some audits for child welfare services, and they actually end up having to they tried to do, I think it got passed, there was a law that got passed where it was a felony if you threaten, because they were taking more and more concerns in their job about safety. We mentioned banking already. Delivery people can be at risk, and then small groups where people work alone, or like a small business, or there's just a couple of people there. Those are just some of the higher risk occupations. So thinking about what you folks do, there are some risks, but probably not as great as some of these. And we had some examples, that people shared earlier on about, some of the things that they happened where people weren't happy. Anything about these occupations? So we have a short video here. It's, I think, a couple minutes. So it's just gonna talk a little bit more about workplace violence, summarize what we've been talking about.
People often make a simple mistake. They explain away behavior that makes them uncomfortable but stops short of physical violence. This is because they don't realize that sometimes those behaviors should actually be identified and addressed as workplace violence. Workplace violence includes more than what a lot of people think. It's not just limited to overt physical violence. Workplace violence includes any action or behavior that generates reasonable concern for someone's safety in the context of the workplace or organization. That includes threats, verbal abuse, bullying, intimidation, anything that negatively impacts someone's physical or psychological well-being.
So going back to that video, was there anything that resonated with you about what they counted as workplace violence?
I don't think I would think someone just kind of pushing a paper back at you that's violent. I think that would be like really rude and obnoxious, but not necessarily violent.
So, yeah, I think even the one with he's doing the guy's shoulders, I mean, he's
Yeah.
touching him.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like that guy didn't look comfortable. So, it's kind of like, is it a harassment or is it potentially workplace violence? I mean, there's a fine line that things can escalate. I mean, I think the thing that it's really about when there's concerns for safety. So we don't know what words were said with that paper being, I mean, if we don't know, because it looked like he said something. But a lot of it, we have to look at the context of, what's happening in that situation. So again, the theme is like, it creates a sense of not feeling safe. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at what are some of the workplace violence signs that we can be aware of. So this study was done based on input from businesses in Hawaii. And so usually we don't find a lot of stuff that's local, but I found this and it was from last year, so it's fairly recent. But this is what some businesses found as 12 warning signs that people should pay attention to in the workplace for workplace violence. So we're just going to walk through them and see if you folks have any questions or examples. So increasing social isolation. Increasing social isolation. So someone's becoming more withdrawn, isolating, be a concern. Something to pay attention to. Number 2 is a real big red flag is when someone's like fascinated with violence and mass casualties. And it seems, when we hear about some of those mass casualty events that happen, when they go back and kind of look at precipitating things, this person had some fascination with these type of things. And sometimes they'll reference, something that happened in the past. So that's a huge red flag. Number 3 is direct or veiled threats against colleagues or leadership. And so, if someone is disgruntled and they make threats against a coworker or leadership, sometimes it's in the heat of the moment, but something we should like think that's not cool and it's potentially unsafe. So a lot of these things, looking in the context, you're going to want to bring it to someone's attention, and we'll talk more about that. When people have grievance, and so a lot of times they're just packing everything like this and this and this and that. And then they often see that things that happened are to them or maybe other people as an injustice. Changes in job performance or attendance. And sometimes that could be, someone's having some personal problems and it's attendance, it's impacting performance, but kind of looking at, what else is going around. This could be a real concern. A references to any type of weapons and even possession of weapons. A lot of times, just the fact that people have access, they're got a lot of these warning signs that increases the risk. Domestic violence spilling over into the workplace. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in another slide. But when employers start to see that, it's coming to work as well. So like if someone's showing up or calling, checking up on that can be concerning. Substance use, so drugs or alcohol or any dramatic behavior changes is a warning sign. Boundary violations or inappropriate communication. What do you think boundary violations or inappropriate communication examples we might be alarmed about at work?
That's probably going back to the last training, right? Look sharp. You better watch out. What was the added?
Yeah, I like you like something like you're looking sharp, if you keep dressing like that, you better watch out. Yeah, it's like, what does that mean? So it could be in here, so those boundary violations when people push them. Looking at the example that was given earlier, that would be one where someone, I think she said that when someone is like not letting somebody pass, that's like, a boundary, like if you're not letting, or, like even coming in someone's face, maybe hovering over them, those type of things, like, I think about those don't make us feel comfortable. And so they're into those, kind of harassment, but then sometimes they can go a little further. So there are some things that are kind of similar, like we see these things, they can escalate. That flirting could just start out and then it could go further. Like if he turns her down, she might be like, I know where you've been. We don't know if it means right. It's concerning, right? It's like they're not taking no for an answer. An inappropriate communication could even be in the form of like text message or email, even handwritten. If someone's experienced loss or gone through some trauma, and a lot of these things are going on, just having that doesn't necessarily is a warning thing, but a lot of times we're looking at a combination of these warning signs. Concerning social media activities, so like if they're posting things that like it's a little bizarre and out of character or doesn't make me feel good. And then a resistance to authority and disciplinary action. So I'll give you an example of a referral that I got because there was concerns about a lot of these signs. So basically the person got written up. There was new changes and new software and they were struggling with it. And so they were questioning a lot and just not able to keep up. So management was working with this person and they didn't see much progress. So they were on corrective action plan. They weren't a happy camper. Not that any of us would be a happy camper, but then they started collecting all their grievances. So all these grievances came together. And then they walked around like, I'm being picked on, all these injustice. Everybody's picking on me. I didn't do anything wrong. They're targeting me. And then they were kind of watching some dark stuff on Instagram. And then the boundary violations, eavesdropping type of things. And then inappropriate communication, like trying to get everybody like on their side. Um, and then there was, a threat made against the company concerning. So they got a formal referral. Person didn't end up, the person, did end up getting terminated. But because they were with EAP, we were able to kind of really help them work through and be able to process and not go do something that would have been a workplace violence. So we're looking at, a lot of these warning signs, but just because you see like one or two, you're not sure, still report it. You just potentially can escalate. This also came from that same website. And so just pointing out, it gives, some of the folks who did the research, but just looking at where I bulleted the statistics. So 94% of workplace violence perpetrators exhibit some of these warning signs before they attack. So people are, and sometimes what we hear is often like, oh yeah, well, we saw that, we didn't think anything about it. And they were pretty disgruntled. Oh yeah, they made some threats against leadership. Yeah, they were isolating. A lot of times people will go back and say, oh, we saw the signs after the fact. So we're trying to be more proactive and say, if you see something that's concerning, let the manager or let HR know. The second one, it says that early recognition of warning signs reduces workplace violence by 73%. So again, just by seeing them and going, well, let's report this so we can take care of it. And then the last one, it says that when there's a grievance, that really motivates 63% of the workplace attacks. So usually when that person is like grievance and justice, those are things to really pay attention to. So we're going to look at a scenario here, and then we'll look at a couple of more at the end. But you have a coworker named Sandy. She's been with your company for 5 years. She comes in to work. She's yelling words and statements out loud to herself that don't make any sense to anyone. She presents that she's really unaware that there are other people in the same office building. So she's really just not aware. She's spilling out. So you and other people who witnessed this, you're concerned because these are behaviors that I haven't seen. It's not like her. She's not hurting anyone. So what are the concerning behaviors in this situation? It's worse.
That her behaviors aren't like her.
Something's different. So the yelling and not making a lot of sense. So what would you do in this situation if you were one of the people that witnessed this? What are some ideas that you have? How would you handle it? Ask if she needs help. Could ask her. Knew her and you were like, please. Help. You're comfortable. If we do that.
We have a lot of chats.
Okay, let's do the chat.
Okay, so Kara said that some of the behaviors that are concerning, right? So yelling, she's unaware of the space and then her surroundings, maybe disoriented. And then she said that her reaction would depend on, her relationship with Sandy, which is totally a fair point. Kim said Sandy's maybe going through something. She's, concerned about her well-being and, in what can we do? Maybe check in with her. And then Rachel said, it's not the time and the place, but maybe show concern and talk to her. So this is similar to what the first group was kind of saying. And, what we want to kind of say about that is, yeah, please use your discretion. If it's something that maybe you don't feel necessarily like comfortable doing, right? And like, I'm not sure what to do here, then get your manager involved or even, get us involved in HR because we, not that we're trained to deal with these situations, but, we can talk to that person, right? And just kind of delicately touch upon like, hey, are you okay? Like what's going on? And, just so that it doesn't put all of you in a situation where you might not feel comfortable.
Get it, not wanting you to do anything that makes you feel uncomfortable. And if you're not comfortable, like if I was stressed out and not like feeling great, I probably might not feel really comfortable like taking on this, right? And so I might go to my manager But, you know, and sometimes we might know things about Sandy, so some of us may know, some of us may not. It could be that, you know, she's got a lot of stressors in her life, and so she hasn't been sleeping well, so that could potentially cause the lack of judgment and coming in, yelling and not being aware, kind of that disoriented behavior. So again, you have to use your discretion, and a lot of times it will depend on the relationship or what you know about her. And then again, you know, I always think about like timing, so kind of I might, if this was happening and I thought I felt comfortable that I could talk to her, I probably think like, can I do it in private? Do I feel okay with that? Because doing it in the bigger group can make it worse for her. Or I might just say like, you know, maybe I'm just gonna let the manager know and just to give them heads up. So you gotta kind of think about all of those things in the situation. So domestic violence is, I shared with the earlier group, when I started my career many years ago, the first programs I worked in were domestic violence programs. And when I see how it's, you know, there's more awareness, we know that it happens. But it's scary times. And so, I just feel like things, you know, are escalating with more stressors and things happening. A lot of the warning signs that we showed on the previous slide, you might see those in domestic violence situations. Particularly if someone is bringing it to the workplace. So let's say if someone in my family is hurting me and they start showing up, that's spilling over. If I'm, you know, people might know that I'm struggling at home, but it's not spilling over to the workplace, you might encourage me, like, talk to someone or get some help. But we're really looking at when it starts to spill over. And it's, we talked about it earlier too. It's hard because it impacts so many people, not just the company, but the actual person who's being hurt. And so it's really tricky. So we always recommend that if a situation happens where it seems like the domestic violence is spilling over, is consult with EAP. Because there's a lot of things to cover, and I'm brought into some of the cases, and a lot of it is just making sure the person's safe, providing those assistance, supports, letting them know what kind of resources are in the community, but then really working together to make sure there's a safety plan that helps protect the victim as well as the company. So it's a lot. So you know, just if you see somebody and you know something like they shouldn't be here, or they're like calling up and making threats, you know, or let somebody know. So I mean, our tendency is like, we don't want to get involved, but it puts a lot of people at risk. So these are some indicators of when it's immediate threat and when you should be reporting it. And again, you know, the expectation of HDS is that you folks aren't, you know, diffusing situations. It's just you want to be aware and report whenever you see something that feels unsafe. So just any type of agitated behavior, you know, so people a lot of times are moving a lot faster. It just, to me, it just kind of looks unpredictable. And then anything that, like, you know, we could be angry, but we don't have to like do anything about it. We might be like having a little bit of like body language frustration, but when people start to like really, you see a lot of anger, or people just start to like space out. A lot of times they kind of go into like this tunnel vision, and then they're not like thinking about like good choices. So kind of watch out for people when they're angry. We talked a little bit about movement into someone else's space, so kind of looking at these things, all of these things. So a lot of times when people are angry and agitated, they'll move really close. You know, like they don't have those boundaries. And then of course the loud tone of voice, like yelling, and thinking about this is like not the appropriate, it's not your indoor voice, right? You know, it's not appropriate for the situation or the business. Any aggressive touching, and then just that rigid body posture. So just kind of think about like, what does this person look like? Look kind of scary. Kind of like, yeah, I don't need to intervene. We need to like have somebody else that's qualified to do that. So hopefully you don't have this kind of, you know, situations in your work, but you know, there's a risk for any company. So we're going to talk a little bit about the reporting piece of it. It's hard because, you know, we work with people and we want to get people in trouble. But really, you know, your company has, you know, the policy in place is like, we're not gonna retaliate. The goal is to keep everybody safe. So a lot of times people fear retaliation or they're worried about what's the outcome. Like if I tell, you know, my manager that, Angie's boyfriend's coming around acting a little scary, I'm gonna get Angie in trouble. But what if you didn't report it and something bad happened? That's always what we don't want to happen. So a lot of times we worry about that one, and then we just don't want to make waves. We want people to know I hold or whatever. But think about for the best of the company and everybody. You want it to be safe. All right, we're going to talk about prevention. So prevention is critical, and so just knowing the policy and procedure. It's very well written and very clear on and what to do. So know how to access it. Notify a manager or someone in human resources if you ever have any concerns about behavior. And again, going back to like, sometimes it feels uncomfortable, but it might just be like, I just wanted to share something you saw, describe the behavior, just wanted to bring it to the attention. Always be aware of your surroundings. And then just follow any security measures. And I believe you folks have some policies on those security measures as well. But again, ask for guidance from human resources or your manager if you ever have any questions. So in your policy, it includes that retaliation is not something that HDS will tolerate. And so if someone does retaliate because someone has reported, it's a violation of the policy, and it could be, the person could be subject to disciplinary action. So again, wanting people to look out for each other, keep it safe, and report if you ever see anything that seems like it's not safe, or potentially not safe. So we're going to look at a couple of scenarios before we end today. We're going to talk as a group, and the folks in the virtual can add to the chat. The first one is your coworker is Anna. She's single. She lives alone. She's worked at your company for 5 years. She's that pleasant, friendly, happy-go-lucky. Everybody likes her. She's reliable. She works hard. So she arrives at work 30 minutes late. You smell alcohol. She's just not looking like her hygiene's not up to par, and she's upset. And when you ask her if she's okay, she snaps. She's like, yeah, why is everybody asking me this? Just get off my back. So let's look at this one. How might you respond to her?
I'd probably let her know that she smells like alcohol.
If you felt comfortable doing that, other people, what might you do? You might not reply to her after that. You might just go to the manager and go, this is what I saw and observed. I smell alcohol. What are your immediate concerns with her? Thinking about what you've been talking about. What's concerning? Is it the alcohol, but anything else concerning?
She's not her normal self.
She's out of character. Yeah, a couple of actions you could do is maybe try to check on her, let her know you're concerned, or you might feel like this is better to let someone else, like human resources or my manager or her manager, know about it. Really, kind of like the circumstances and your relationship with her.
Do have a chat.
Yeah.
Kara said that, mentioned to Anna, right, that she seemed off today and that she's wanted to check in and make sure she was okay and ask her if she might need some help.
We had a similar incident at our company. I was a supervisor at the time, and someone went to lunch and came back. Sure. And so, and that was kind of my first thing is like, we have to get this person safe. I tried calling family members because I actually knew one of the family members. I ended up driving her home because I just mentioned a car because she was like, I got it. I'm like, I got keys, but we made sure her car was safe and then we took her home and then we dealt with it later on, but yeah, it was hard. But yeah, we don't want people to drive home. So here's Leo. So he's married, got a couple of children, great husband and father. He's been at your company almost a decade, so a pretty long time. Everybody talks about, he's a good worker, his work ethic. Everybody from his customers to coworkers does good work. He goes out of the way to help others. But yesterday you overheard him pleading and arguing with someone on his cell phone. Then a little bit later, he left early to attend to a family emergency. So when he comes in the next day, he's apologizing, but he came to work late. And what you observe is that he's wearing the exact same clothes from yesterday, and he has a bruise on his arm and his face. How would you respond to him? What would you do?
If I ask if he's okay, just looking at the physical appearance. Like, what happened? Yeah.
Are you okay? What happen's a good one. You kind of really can just give people that space to share. It doesn't feel like judgmental, like what happened. It's a good one. Some people might feel comfortable checking in on him. Some people might be just need to let my manager or HR know. What are your immediate concerns in this situation?
Their safety and well-being, clearly something happened, so making sure they're okay.
Yeah, it could have been that, something happened. It could be DV too, domestic violence. We're not sure. Could be. Well, one of the things the earlier group talked about is, also depending on the nature of the injuries, whether or not encouraging to get medical help, just depending on what those are. Or, like asking to be medical attention. How comfortable. So again, kind of back to, the relationship and your comfort level. But in a lot of these situations, even if you do decide you're comfortable talking with them, depending on what they share, it might be really wise to let somebody give them a heads up too. So you can kind of you're not carrying it by yourself. Just talk to them. They said they're okay. I just wanted to let you know that I noticed that they weren't themselves in alcohol or injuries, to let someone else know.
We have some chat participation again. Ari said that she would inform HR, which I know Angie mentioned. And then, immediate concerns, so potential violence occurring at work, maybe some spillover from home into the workplace. And then Kim just had a question, is he okay and is he safe, right? Which is kind of in line with, our immediate concern is the employee safety and the well-being.
Okay, so when in both these situations with Anna and Leo, there's definitely some concerns for their overall well-being and possible what's going on with them and could it spill over to work. And so a lot of times it's the resources that are available. You could even remind them, hey, check out the EAP program. It's free and confidential. You could do that. HR would probably, if they were involved with a manager, they might like to do the same thing. Because then that gives them a place to talk to and sort out what's going on to get that counseling. And then also for some of you that are in manager positions is sometimes you can consult with the EAP about we had this TV situation. So actually, we did have one that I worked on and we really worked closely with the person who was being hurt as well as the company to make sure everybody was safe. So just a reminder, your benefit, you get 6 visits per year and the renewal date starts over in January. And as I mentioned last time for the folks who were present, it doesn't have to be work related to the job. I think just related to, I need to talk. Some people just come in and it's like, I just need to spill all this because I don't feel like I can spill it with anybody else. So, so that's a common thing. Like I don't really know who to talk to, so I just need to have someone to be my sounding board. And then there's also the financial and legal consultations as well. And then for some of the more serious situations, like I shared, the other company that I worked with, that it can be a formal referral. He was the one that showed a lot of those warning signs, showed several of them. His company was concerned, so they actually made a formal referral. And a formal referral, you still get confidentiality, but we ask you to sign that I communicate back to your company that you did follow through. This is the goal we're working on, but you still get the confidentiality. But that's just something to know that it can be formal when we have these concerns. So, and you can always consult with us on those. All right, so here's our contact information, and we mentioned that it's in your, how to access the benefits. All the information is inside the, your payroll system. So if you just want to go in and like, I want to do it on my own, I don't need to ask HR, here's how I contact them. And we do, offer virtual and in-person. And thank you for attending, being here, and, open to learning about how you can be more aware and prevent workplace violence.